species here.
No, no, no!
A million girls would kill for that job.
Now give me the show.
I'm Vanessa.
And I'm George. We are both fashion journalists on the MA Fashion Communication course at Central St Martin's. Next week our course is over, so tonight we are going to celebrate all of our accomplishments of the year with an hour-long special.
From market reports to shadowing projects to after-school drinks on the steps.
So without further ado, let's invite Eoghan Flynn from the Fashion Critical Studies course with our review of the year.
Meeting your classmates and soon-to-be close friends through a laptop screen in your childhood bedroom was not the way we wanted to start MA Fashion Communication. Happy New Year came with Happy New Lockdown, and with the gate to Central St Martin's firmly closed, we started our postgraduate journeys completely online. However, amidst the turbulent clouds of the pandemic, there were plenty of silver linings. During her first week at CSM, the fashion journalist Rosie was invited to interview Mutual Prada and Raf Simons following the Prada Autumn-Winter menswear show.
Hi, I'm Rosie Davenport from the UK.
Hi, how are you?
Which school?
I study fashion journalism at Central St Martin's, London.
Journalism. We're gonna get a tough question.
With the results broadcast around the world, she was literally sandwiched between two famous designers in week one. Our first term celebrated teamwork through the Shadowing Project. Students of fashion journalism, fashion image, and fashion critical studies joined together to shadow and offer support to MA fashion designers in the development of their final collection. Let's now watch a short film created by Aparna Aji, Laurie Cooper, Grace Sowerby, and Didier Chung to promote MA fashion.
Day to day, I think I'm just trying to get up at the same time every day. I'm trying at 8 every time, but it's more like 9:30, get a coffee, try to be at my workspace at 10.
The way I'm working, I'm kind of a bit of a hermit anyway, so it's quite exciting that I can just sort of hide away and work, you know.
Instead of always being, okay, I need to have this special fabric to work, I need to have this special thing to make it work well. Maybe there are other ways, that's not going to work exactly how I was planning on making things happen, but more of a free and spontaneous process.
And design very subconsciously without over-intellectualizing or overthinking anything.
So I think, the biggest difference, my housemate's laughing at me, the biggest difference has certainly been the environment.
The process is always the same, but I think the environment or the story around it is always changing.
We want to redefine a new way of living, so it has been the first immediate impact I could point out.
The challenge was to, instead of taking an already existing world, was to make it my own there.
And now I've got this little space where table here, table there, table there, and I could just spin around to pattern cut here, sew here.
Voila.
It's sort of dressmaking as a form of alchemy, base metal to gold, and creating something beautiful from maybe scraps or bank bags. Or there's one top where I just opened up a sofa and ripped out strips, and then that's wrapped around as a top, and it's all quite instant.
There is this kind of main theme with kind of the just duality between
this very computerized process that I did with the collection, but also kind of this very hand-done element.
Yeah, it's almost like a diary.
Taking it back to Lego days, taking Lego apart and building something new. It's the same way I approach fashion design.
I'm about picking apart things and putting them back together again and seeing how things can be constructed differently.
There's a lot of things that have been stripped down to its bare minimum. Now that kind of goes out the window and you go like, well, that isn't how people dress anymore.
I think it's also like realizing you can't control stuff and letting go of control and kind of being okay with like, you know, like as humans sometimes we're so afraid of the unknown.
Like urban isolation is something that's, you know, it happens in the best and the worst of times. And it's like, you can choose to like wrap yourself in isolation as a comfort, or you can choose to be like alienated by it.
It's kind of like the big crescendo at the end of it.
That's when you saw like, wow, people, you can really do something with nothing. Does that answer your question at all, or was that just a ramble?
As COVID-19 restrictions began to ease, we were invited with socially distant open arms into one granary square. Although we couldn't enjoy a pint in the platform bar, we could spend afternoons in the library, having our Waitrose lunches together and after-class drinks alongside the canal. We discovered how easy the lively community that we created online could continue to bloom and grow in person. Beyond the adversities of the pandemic, MA Fashion Communication has been a source of joy. In the Fashion Critical Studies pathway, our memorable trip to Margate remains a course highlight. We visit the Turner Contemporary Art Gallery and study the Egyptomania collection of fashion exhibition maker, historian and educator Jenna Rossi Camus. Throughout the year, Fashion Critical Studies were introduced to a variety of lecturers who shared their dynamic insights and led hands-on workshops to develop our own research. The teaching team of the Fashion Journalism pathway was further strengthened with the arrival of Sarah McAlpine, who recently stepped down from the distinguished role of Fashion Features Editor of Elle. MA Fashion Communication has welcomed a vibrant selection of esteemed guests. The fashion designer Donatella Versace, in conversation with the Business of Fashion's editor-at-large Tim Blanks, created pandemonium at CSM.
It's my pleasure to introduce the amazing Donatella Versace.
Instagram accounts flooded with images afterwards. For fashion journalists, another big guest was the co-designer of Clemence Ribeiro, Inacio Ribeiro, who offered incredibly honest and upfront advice into the fashion industry. On Tuesdays, Alumni Hour featured former students of MA Fashion Communication, who shared personal experiences of how the course prepared them for a career in the world of fashion. We really appreciate their guidance and ongoing support with pathway-specific seminars. And as we tentatively enter the intimidating yet exciting chapter of post-college life, it's reassuring and encouraging to hear of the successes of former students. Despite their primarily online experience, the class of 2020 have professionally blossomed in the industry. Leading the way is Malcolm Curtis Hill from Chicago, securing career goals as fashion critic at Nick Knight's show studio. Shreya Zamindar writes for Vogue and Grazia back home in India, whilst Lisa Zerngast works at L'Officiel in Austria. Zoel Hernandez Lopez manages L'Officiel's website in Spain. From the 2019 cohort, Ella Bardsley became the editor of Wonderland. On the Fashion Critical Studies pathway, former student Eleonora Del Bosco joined the New York-based think tank Fashion Forward's fellowship program. As well as beginning her PhD research, Zara Krutz launched the fashion and culture podcast Unbiased Label. Charlotte Brachtendorf became a PhD candidate in 2020, funded by the German Research Foundation at the Bauhaus University in Weimar, Germany. This year has been very exciting for the alumni of the Fashion Image Pathway. Ethan Hart works with award-winning brand communications agency Manifest. Silvana Trevally works with photographic agency and licensing platform Kinsing. She collaborated with fashion image stylist Daniela Bynum on a major shoot for Vogue Italia. Exhibiting in Arles, France, Jessica Gianelli was shortlisted for the Dior Photography and Visual Arts Award for Young Talents. We'll keep you updated on the successes of MA Fashion Communications class of 2021. One of the first to land the job is fashion journalist Kelly Lynn, who has just started work for the press team at MCQ. Finally, it's important to highlight our manifesto of sustainable fashion communication, which was first shared at this event last year and formally released earlier this year. It's been written by alumna Bella Webb. In 2022, we are looking for ways to scale up our ideas, possibly working with the UN Environment Programme. We also plan to take a more activist stance with regard to fast fashion companies, not just disapproving, but campaigning for change. Last week, we celebrated the MA Fashion Image Showcase, which opened on the 1st of December. Let's feel the ambience.
Hi Ruby, thank you so much for agreeing to speak to us today about your freelance work that you've been doing for Alexander McQueen this year. And to start with, I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about what your role actually is.
Sure, so my role at McQueen is essentially their behind the scenes photographer. So it's essentially my job to document the process of each collection in development, kind of from start to finish, from kind of initial toiles in the atelier, in calico, right up until the finished kind of garment that you see. But yeah, I spend a lot of time in the atelier where there's a series of kind of seamstresses, pattern cutters. There's Judy, who's kind of like manager of the atelier. She's been there since like the McQueen days, so she's kind of running it in there. And I capture a lot of content in there, and then as each piece at every stage of development, it's constantly going up to the fittings rooms to show Sarah and her design team, and then they'll be fitting at every stage these garments onto the models. So I'm often recording the fittings as well.
Yeah, that sounds like a really amazing experience, and I wonder what is it like working for such a distinguished and famous fashion house?
It's funny because before I went in there, I had no idea kind of what to expect, but I was really kind of amazed at how actually down to earth the team are there and how kind of like nurturing they've been. And yeah, it's an extremely kind of exciting, progressive space to be involved in. Every time I'm there, something different is happening, so it constantly feels like I'm seeing something new, really.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if there's a particular event or project that you've worked on that's been particularly exciting while you've been there.
Yeah, I think the first project I was brought in on was their Autumn-Winter 21 collection, which was their kind of, which was these anemone dresses, so inspired by the anemone flower. And these really kind of like bold red kind of pinks and deep kind of earthy colours. And that was particularly special because it was a really special kind of group of girls that they had modelling garments, and it was the first kind of experience where I could see how really each dress was perfectly fitted to each of the girls. For some of them, it was their first kind of modelling job. So like, for example, one of the girls, Luca, she worked at Algae at the time, and it was her first kind of modelling job. So that was kind of amazing to see how that kind of space can lift someone. And now she's like walked the most recent show.
Yeah, and is there any way that your experience while working there has kind of influenced your personal work now?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely see how themes within McQueen translate kind of into my own thinking within my own work. And I definitely think from working there, it's pushed me to be more confident with the kind of styling that I bring into the images. So I definitely think, some of the garments for my major project were inspired by some of the shapes and things that I've seen happening at McQueen.
Yeah, and so this is a behind-the-scenes photography job.
Yeah.
How does that differ from the other work that you've done before?
I definitely think it's a lot more fast-paced. I'm definitely taking an abundance of images, and there's a lot more going on. So I definitely think it's a faster process, but I still think I'm able to translate the same way that I work with the camera.
And how do you find those moments that you want to capture as a behind-the-scenes photographer?
I think I'm looking for some kind of interaction, so some kind of engagement between the garment, the model and the team. So I'm trying to kind of show that energy. I'm always kind of looking for touch, hands kind of moving with the clothes on the body, how the models are engaging with one another. I think that makes an image really interesting.
Great, thank you, Ruby. So now I'm going to hand over to Grace, who's going to talk a little bit about the Fashion at Central St Martin's podcast project that we worked on this year.
Hi everyone, I'm Grace Salby, and in this segment I'm going to be talking about Central St Martin's first ever podcast, Fashion at Central St Martin's. We've been working on this project since May, since term 2. We've only just started releasing the episodes now, so I'm sure by the time this has been released, I think pretty much all of the episodes would have come out. There's 6 different episodes, each episode focusing on a different theme, each theme speaking to numerous notable alumni who studied at Central St Martin's. The process began essentially with Danielle Deutschen, who led the whole project, and she is a podcast producer and writer, and she's known for her work on Matches Fashion podcast and also The Collector's House. And in works with the sound engineer Warren Berg of Eoghan Productions, several fashion journalists plus fashion critical studies student Owen Flynn all worked together, and we basically started the work before the summer focusing on which famous names and notable names from Central St Martin's were going to get involved and talk to us a bit about their time at the uni, but also what they've gone on to do and the impact of social media on our world today and their work. The process began with the journalists each focusing on who to get in touch with, and once we had responses from these different names, we then did different interviews with them, each of them being about 30 minutes long. And some of the names we got onto the podcast include fashion designer Mary Catron-Zoo, photographer Campbell Addy, who shot the cover of Times with Edward Enninful on the front, Depetza, who's obviously famous for her wet looks, which are very popular, and also Matty Boven as well, who is a fashion designer, specialises in knitwear, and I had the honour of interviewing him a few months ago for the podcast. It was just a really interesting experience in seeing how a podcast worked, and as a producer as well for the podcast, I learned a lot about how it goes on behind the scenes and what can go wrong, but also what goes right, and it's an incredibly rewarding experience. And I'll be speaking a bit to Rosie Davenport, who is one of the hosts of the podcast, who hosted it with Owen Flynn and Vanessa. Now I'll be speaking to Rosie Davenport, who was one of the hosts for Fashion at Central St Martin's. So Rosie, my love, if you could tell us a bit about interviewing Esme Young, who is, presenter of the Sewing Bee?
Yeah, and she's working at Central St Martin's as well. She's quite the character. I've watched the Sewing Bee for ages. It's like my guilty pleasure. It's not that guilty of a pleasure, but I absolutely love it. And she came in, she's 72, she went to Central St Martin's from when she was 18. So she's a bit of, a veteran. But she was lovely, and it was just really great to hear her stories. It was so nice talking about when she was younger and read magazines, and also the importance of making clothes and fixing clothes, which I think is really nice to have a sustainable element. We're all doing our bit, and it made me want to be better at sewing. But she was lovely, and it was great how it integrated in each of the episodes. You didn't just get one, like sometimes with podcasts you just get the one episode, but it's really nice how actually they all fitted together. And I know that when I was editing episode 5, we're talking about the joy of creativity, and Esme Young says something about how she hates making wedding dresses, and then I think it was Dimitra Petzer was then like, oh, I love bridal. So it's like so funny how they both ended up, we didn't even ask the same questions, but they both ended up saying the same thing, which was fun.
And you also did the hosting as well with Vanessa and Eoghan, who is from Critical Studies.
Yeah.
Tell us how hosting was. Was it like a nerve-wracking experience? And yeah, what was the process like?
Yeah, I mean, you were there.
Yeah,
you saw me on the mic, feeling like Britney Spears. But no, I really enjoyed it. I normally hate the sound of my own voice, which is hilarious because, you know, then I have to sit and listen and, you know, promote this podcast with my voice. But no, I really enjoyed it, and I think Warren, the sound engineer, was so great. It made you feel really comfortable, and it's really nice how it dips in and out of different people speaking, and Owen's got, you know, the best voice, so he gets to intro.
No, literally, and you've got those lovely Newcastle
dulcet tones.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to us, Rosie.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, their episodes should all be out now. I think we're.
Yes,
yeah,
they will all be out.
Yeah, it's insane.
Go watch it, go listen.
So yeah, thank you.
Gurjan Loins, Fashionist speaking. If you'd like to listen to more, listen to our podcast on Apple and Spotify podcasts.
Hi Yao, thank you for agreeing to speak with us about your final project today. So could we start by talking a little bit about the concepts behind your final project?
好的，我的 final pro， 我的手机响，对不起 ，sorry。我的 final project 就是主要的主题是中式土味魔幻美学。然后我的灵感来源于就是快手、抖音的那些土味短视频。我其实就是在本科的时候我就很喜欢看那些土味视频，然后我在本科的时候就开始记录一些就是这种魔幻社会主义美学，然后当时其实只是做一个记录。来到 MA， 我觉得就是可以再研究一下这个美学，然后我就觉得可以把它跟时尚做结合。我拍这个土味美学，我不是说它土，我是觉得就是它其实也是亚文化的一种，然后我觉得其实它是很有创造力的。我觉得我们就是没有什么高级和土之分，我觉得这就是我们就是中国就有的很有创造力的一种文化。我觉得我们就是可以再去研究它，然后就是做成一种新的美学。然后这是我的 final project， 就是探索这个东西。
So when did you decide that this was what you wanted to explore?
其实在我 BA 的时候就是有想要做这个东西，但是 BA 的时候就是做一种记录，然后想要探寻是我来学这个圣马丁这个专业的目的。然后其实探索这个文化这个方面，我觉得还有很长的路程。 这就算是刚刚开始。
And how did that concept develop over time?
可是我觉得这个问题就是有点重复我刚刚回答的那个。
你就说你刚刚回答过。
不太好吧？
快。
哦，行。就是我刚刚说的，我之后就是虽然还会做3D， 然后但是之后还是会拍照，就是想到一些可爱造型，就是可能不会单独再出一组，我就是陆陆续续，就是哪一天觉得有个什么东西很好玩，我就把它拍下，可能之后再组成一本小的册子、小的书出版什么之类的。
And when you look back at the work that you had at the beginning of the year and then compared to your final project, how has that developed?
最开始我之前的那个就是一个相当于记录的形式，然后现在的 MA 就是相当于一个创造和就是改变发展的一个阶段，然后就是之后我希望是能形成一种自己的美学体系，然后来做这个事情。
Thanks very much, Jan.
Thank you so much.
So I'll start with an overview and introduction into my projects. When starting out, I knew that I wanted my project to be experimental I wanted the outcomes to be abstract, but most importantly, I just wanted to have fun. I think that since starting the MA, I was sort of stuck in a sense of trying to find my voice and trying to find what it is that I was interested in. And for my final project for my BA, actually, it was during coronavirus pandemic, and so we weren't able to physically produce any photo shoots. Everything was virtual, everything was digital, and this is sort of what led me into the idea for my MA final project. I think that always stuck with me because that was my first introduction into CGI, computer-generated fashion image. I was looking at digital artists such as Robbie Barrett, who is an amazing AI artist, and he recently created prints for Acne Studios' latest collection. I have always been heavily inspired by colour, particularly the uses of red and blue. I was first inspired by Mugler's photography from the 80s and 90s, and this has always stuck with me throughout all of my work, which is why you'll find that a lot of my images contain some element of blue or red, whether it is through styling or lighting. My project is abstract in its purest form, and I knew that I wanted to let myself go and to sort of fall in love with the imperfect, because when using this AI technology, it is so unpredictable, you really cannot control the outcomes. So it may be that the dress, for example, is very crisp and very clear, but the model's face is completely distorted to the point where you would never be able to make out, who is wearing the dress. I found that really beautiful, that sort of juxtaposition and all of the textures and the color created by the AI. You can never try to recreate that, which I find is always the most exciting part. So when I was collaborating with the AI artist for my MA project, Malthus, he sent me 100 AI images per look, and it was so difficult to choose because all of them were just so beautiful in their own way. But we finally selected the strongest ones, and I'm very happy with the outcomes. I think that, in a sense, it pushes the boundary and makes you think about what is the role of a fashion image maker today. There are real people involved in the production of this, but it makes even me question what is the role of a photographer today. The process used for creating the actual imagery itself, it's an AI algorithm. And so you input the images into the algorithm, and what the algorithm does is it synthesizes a new image based off of the input images, and you rerun the algorithm until the outcome from the algorithm is as close to the input original images as it can possibly get. That, in a sense, is what the AI does. It creates fakes.
So an amazing film by Kallan there.
Yeah, and I think it's now time to move on. Let's talk about me now. Hi, so I'm Megan. I'm in Fashion Critical Studies.
And I'm Rosie, and I'm on the Fashion Journalism pathway. So Megan, congratulations on getting your dissertation in, finally. So can you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of started with the idea of posthumanism, which is talking about how technology, nature, and humans all are kind of constantly interacting, how those boundaries are always being kind of fluxed. And it totally, completely rejects the idea that humans are the center of the universe and everything around us is here to serve us. So I started with that, and then I connected it with puppy play, which is a BDSM community, and tried to find where that kind of fits within.
Really interesting. So, kind of an out there topic. What inspired you to go down this route?
I started with my very strange fascination with 1950s monster movies, people in these monster costumes. So I started with that. So, I could probably come up with a dissertation topic around this somehow. So I kind of traced humans wearing animal costume, from people wearing cheetah print just to actual in full garments. And then eventually it led to this BDSM community that I thought would be just kind of the right way to go. It just felt right.
Yeah. And did anything particularly surprise you when you were doing your investigation, your researching? Anything that really stood out that you learned and have taken with you, I guess, from the process?
Yeah, I think the big part for me was that there are so many facets to the community and so many different perspectives. There's new guard and old guard. There's a lot of different voices. And it's very challenging to try to fit them all in only 15,000 words.
Of course.
So I'm happy that I got at least a nice base, a nice general base, of a few representative parts of it. But overall, that was kind of my biggest surprise, was how varied and vast the community is.
And what was the most difficult part of it? I know it was a huge kind of word count, but like you were saying, was it the hardest part condensing it down?
Absolutely. Yeah. I found so many components of it that I was just so interested in, because as you know, it's quite an interesting thing. Lots of stuff's going on.
Yeah. Lots of books. I always saw you with the books.
I got lots of interesting books on human dogs. Yeah. but that was hard. That was the hard part. Like I said, I'm glad I had a nice general knowledge of it, but I definitely could be diving deeper, and I wanted to, but I couldn't because of the word count.
And what was your favourite part of the whole experience?
I think definitely bringing to light a community that isn't often appreciated. Yeah. It's a queer community, it's a BDSM community, it's people dressing up like animals. It's something that mass media likes to sensationalize and kind of make fun of, to be honest, and people just think it's weird and like to write it off. But I think that putting it in academic light kind of shows hey, no, this is important, we can talk about it, and we can explore it through kind of an academic way and appreciate it that way.
Yeah, I love that. Well, congratulations again.
Thank you so much, Rosie.
Thank you, Megan and Rosie, for that really interesting conversation on Megan's dissertation. Today, I'm going to be speaking to Vanessa, one of the fashion journalists at CSM.
Hello.
If you could tell us a bit about your grandmother's clothing and also her wig, and how that's been important to you today and how you've lived your life.
Yeah. My grandmother, Hannah Okwa, was a matriarch in every way. She loved her children, and when her grandchildren were born, she loved them as much as well. But another thing that my grandmother loved was clothes. In her younger days, she was a seamstress, and so she always shared an affinity for clothes. And now that I think about it, I found my love of thrift and secondhand clothing from my grandmother. Till my grandmother died, my grandmother went thrift shopping every week at the markets, and I would find myself going shopping at her house. I like to think that she was shopping for us because she rarely bought anything in her size, but I always went thrift shopping at my grandmother's house. This dress in this photo wasn't thrifted actually. Another thing my grandmother loved to shop for was fabric, because like most Nigerians, she loved to have her clothes made. And so I found this dress in her room when we were cleaning up her room after she had passed. And I'd never seen my grandmother wear this dress, but it was very much my grandmother. It was loose fitting because she hated being restricted. Probably also why she never wore a bra, like me. It was a bold color because she loved color. It had multiple embellishments, more than I would put on a piece of clothing, but it was very much her. Another thing that I found in her room was this wig on my head. And it sort of made me realize something else that I had in common with my grandmother that I never probably put together, was that we both loved wigs. My grandmother loved a good wig. Now her wigs were always in a horrible state because she never took care of her wigs. And let's be honest, I never take care of my wigs as I should as well. Something I do regret though is I had promised to buy my grandmother a new wig, and I never got a chance to do so before she died. Which is why when I saw this horrible wig, it was uncomfortable, but I took it. It's not a wig I wear because I would never wear it every day,
but it just reminded me of something that I shared with my grandmother. I love her wigs. And yeah, it's weird to think about it now because these photos were taken mere days after she was married, and I probably was mourning at the time. But I love these pictures. They're probably my favorite pictures of myself because when I look at them, I see my grandmother. And today I'm wearing a dress made from fabric that I found in her room. This used to be a skirt. And now when I wear it, I feel my grandmother. It doesn't smell like her anymore. She probably hadn't worn it in years, but it's very much her.
Amazing. And do you feel like, especially with this dress and the other items which you inherited from your grandma, do you feel like there's a reassurance in, since losing her, do you feel like there's reassurance in that grief, in the fact that you kind of carry on a legacy?
Of course. And it's sort of imprinted on me the importance of owning clothes that last.
Yeah.
Owning clothes that can survive you. Because her clothes survived her. They're with me now. And if I take care of them the way I should, and I will, they would last and survive me as well. And I think it's important to not look at clothing as just random pieces of fabric, but as things that hold in them messages, that hold in them feelings, that hold in them emotions, that hold in them people.
Yeah.
The people who wore them, the people who saw them, the people who lived their lives in this clothing. And so I want to buy clothes that last. I want to buy clothes that survive me. I want to own clothes that people who would live after me would remember me by and say, this was Vanessa.
I think there's something so lovely about that. And also, do you feel like, especially since inheriting these clothes, do you feel like that's changed the way you shop as well on a sustainable front? Do you feel like, even though the dress you're talking about wasn't thrifted, do you feel like that encourages you to thrift shop more and make your own clothes from what you have?
Yeah. It was funny because there are quite a few of us now in my family who know how to make clothes. I took a random beginner sewing class. I have a cousin who sewed, my cousin made this dress out of my stuff that my grandmother left behind. And so yeah, it definitely has influenced how I shop and how I love a thrifted garment. 90% of my wardrobe is thrifted, and I'm hoping that very soon 100% of my wardrobe will be thrifted. and once I get my sewing machine back again, I probably would make more of my clothes, just random things, like a top here and there, a skirt here and there. But yeah, it definitely has affected how I look at clothes and how I shop now.
Amazing. Thank you so much for speaking to us about all of that.
Thanks,
It's
great.
beautiful. You look amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Hi everyone. So today I'm sat with Bluebell, who is an image maker on the MA course. And right here we have a book which she made. And we're going to be discussing that and a bit of the influences behind it and how this came about. So, Bluebell, tell us a bit about why you decided to make a book over anything else.
So, I think it felt really important for me to make a physical piece of work. I think, like, I graduated from my BA last year and everything was like online and digital, and I just felt like I really wanted to have like this tactile piece of work, and I spent a lot of time thinking about like matrilineal relationships of clothing, like heritage clothing, and passing pieces down through the generations. So I kind of wanted to create something that I could pass down, which was like a sort of heirloom in a way. I definitely won't, but you know.
I'll buy it. I do really want a copy, but I'll just show them.
And then I like bound it myself, which was also, I bound it myself, which was also kind of important because I wanted to like have an element of like handcrafting in it, which was cool.
And obviously, I don't know if you can see, but the book focuses a lot on, well, your photography focuses a lot on swimming and your native Scotland and swimming in the lochs, and obviously about these maternal relationships. Why did you choose to focus on Scotland and swimming, and what's the connection to motherhood as well for you?
So, I feel like my project, sort of explores like my relationships with women and water, and I think moving from Scotland to London, I was very aware that I had like very little nature around me, especially being in lockdown when we couldn't really go outside, and I was just like craving nature and like water and kind of being able to like swim in natural environments, which is what I spend a lot of time doing back home. So I feel like it started off wanting to maybe replicate that kind of feeling, and then when I started like researching the project and beginning it, I actually just decided that I didn't want to try and replicate that in London. I just wanted to go home and do it in person, so it was fun.
And you talk a lot as well, you say in one bit that you love the idea of clothing as well, and this idea of passing down clothing, is that got any relationship to the theme as well? Or is that just a very separate thing entirely?
No, like completely. So a lot of the styling within this is either I reached out to like small independent designers who make their own pieces, or I use like family archival pieces as well, which was nice. So like on the cover, you can not really see it, but like there's like the jumper is like vintage Scottish wool, and then the dress is my grandma's from like the 1930s, which is nice to have a family connections, I guess. And then this is my god sister, like where we live in Scotland, which is different.
And you end the book with with a Dolly Alderton quote. Which I'm gonna find.
We love Dolly Alderton.
We love it. Yeah. So I'm gonna read it, and it says, "I think our collective mother, the one that belongs to nature, ensures we turn into our mums in a small or significant way as a survival necessity. We become our mothers, so we never ever have to be without them." And what made you choose Dolly Alderton? Why did you?
My friend Grace sent it to me and said that she thought it reminded her of the project, which you were right. So I think like when you sent it to me, I just thought like that kind of summed up what I was thinking about, I guess. And like I'm glad that Dolly Alderton wrote it because I love her. But I think just like the actual quote kind of like looking at like Mother Nature, my relationship with my mother, relationships with like motherly figures in my life, and then like other women in my life, like my sister and my friends and stuff. So.
Beautiful. Well, that's basically it. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Okay.
And next we'll be speaking to Lily and Eomji about Eomji's work for a final major project for image making. Thank you.
Hi, we're back again to speak with image maker Eomji about her final project. So Eomji, thank you for speaking to us today. So could you just explain a little bit about the concept behind your final project?
제 작업은 파이널 프로젝트 관련해서 처음에 스크린 베이스 라이프에 대한 생각을 이제 그 작업에 담았어요. 그리고 그 작업 안에서 의문을 가졌던 점은 런던에서도 그렇고 한국에서도 그렇고 모든 사람들이 다 그들의 스마트폰만 바라보고 거의 두세 명 중 3명 중 1명 정도는 그들의 폰만 보고 가는 것들이 매우 재밌었고, 그리고 또 그런 점에서는 이제 또 제가 어떻게 작업을 시작해야 될지 영감을 줬던 부분이었어요. 그래서 이제 그 부분에서 이제 발전시켜서 우리가 어디에서 존재하고 있는지 현실 이제 정말 where is the reality? 그래서 현실과 가상 그 사이에서 우리가 어디에서 존재하고 있는지 먼저 이제 이 작업을 시작을 하게 됩니다.
So how did you decide that this was the concept that you wanted to explore?
그 사이에서 아까 전에 말했던 것처럼 이제 가상과 이제 현실 사이에서 우리의 아이덴티티가 정말 어디에 있는지, 그리고 그 우리가 존재하고 있는 지금 현실 이런 도시 얼반 라이프와 그리고 또 디지털 안에서의 우리가 어디서 존재하고 있는지에 대해서 그거를 이제 시각화하는데 많은 중점을 둬서 그리고 어떻게 이제 공부를 해야 할지는 이제 파타피식스라는 그런 개념을 통해서 이제 AR과 VR을 이제 결합시켜서 제 작업으로 이제 시각화합니다.
And how did that concept develop throughout the year?
이 기간 동안에 제 작업은 이제 디지털 디렉팅과 그리고 패션 이미지 메이커로서 그리고 이 안에서는 이제 저는 멀티 플랫폼과 그리고 또 사람들에게 이제 어디언스 인터랙션을 통해서 제 이제 이미지를 어떻게 제시하고 보여줄지 가장 중점적으로 준비를 했었는데 이 마지막 파이널 작업에서 더 그런 것들 저의 세계관, 저의 이런 월드뷰를 보여주려고 노력을 많이 했었어요. 그래서 이제 그 작업 안에서 이제 우리가 앞으로 어떻게 미래를 접근해야 할지 그리고 지금 현재 우리가 살고 있는 곳이 정말 이제 현실과 이 가상 사이에서의 어떤 혼란도 느낄 수도 있고 어떤 누군가는 되게 꿈을 생각할 수도 있는데 저는 그런 것들을 전체적으로 다 담아서 제 작업 안에서 보여주려고 노력했습니다.
And it would be interesting to hear a little bit about how you feel your work has developed from the beginning of the year to now that you've done your final project.
제 안에서는 매우 재밌었던 일들이 많았는데 특히 제가 이제 조금 더 생각했을 때는 심플한 아이디어가 매우 되게 오히려 스트롱하게 사람들에게 접근할 수 있겠다라는 생각을 해서 어떻게 하면 좀 더 이제 강력한 그런 메시지를 전달할 수 있을지 그런 고민을 좀 많이 했었는데 오히려 좀 어려운 시도보다는 정말 제가 이제 디지털 컬처 안에서 경험하고 느꼈었던 그 텍스트 메시지, 소셜 미디어 아니면 그리고 사람들이 이제 소통하는 그런 커뮤니케이션 방법들을 이제 다 모든 것들을 리서치를 다 통해서 그리고 이런 모든 것들을 어떻게 서로 블렌디드 시켜야 될 수 있을지 이 세 개를 그래서 이런 AR이라는 방법을 통해서 콜라주를 했는데 저는 제가 생각했던 아이디어가 매우 만족스럽고 그리고 또 앞으로 제가 이렇게 졸업을 하고 나서도 앞으로 이미지 메이커로서 사람들에게 어떤 메시지를 더 강하게 보여줄 수 있을지 지금 기대가 됩니다.
Great, thank you so much, Eomji.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Seen the last of MAFC?
Not yet.
Alongside the course, Kelly decided to tattoo half of London. Here's Kelly on tattoos, interviewed by Rose.
Do I need to record my soundbite?
So Kelly, tell me about your tattoos. What do you want to know especially about my tattoos? I don't believe in meaning with my tattoos. I got my first one as soon as I turned 18. It's underneath the dragon. I decided to cover it up because I don't relate to it anymore. It was 4 faces, like 2 faces against each other and like 2 faces kissing each other.
What's your biggest piece?
My back piece was the longest.
How long did it take?
12 hours.
12 hours. Did you get it in one
session? Yeah, because I hate having 2 sessions. I just want to be done like 1 hour with the thing done.
Do you have a favourite or?
One on my thumb is like my cat.
And you did that one yourself, didn't you?
No, I got it from my friend in Paris. Last time that I went to Paris, and I love it because every time I type on my phone I just see my cat.
Can you tell me about when and how you started doing that?
I started tattooing during lockdown in London because I was bored and I really wanted to just like fill up the space as much as I could with like all the free time that I had. I did not end up tattooing myself first. I ended up like at the party that I was going when lockdown was finished. Some friends asked me to tattoo them, like they was drunk, and it was really fun. And I think that just started the whole trend of me tattooing my classmates and then tattooing people.
How often do you throw these tattoo parties?
I used to throw it every week, but now with like work and uni, I just can't do it anymore. So it's been like a couple months since my last one.
What's been your most painful tattoo?
My most painful tattoo is the one on my lower back that goes up to my like ass, and it was so painful. I thought I was gonna die, to be honest. Like the lower back part, like especially the middle, was killing me. It was the most painful, yeah, for sure.
What are you getting on today?
I'm letting him do like free hands on my hand. Like he can do whatever he wants because I really love his design. I think it's very organic and it's just very different from the style that I have.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We hope you had a lovely time.
And enjoy the rest of your night. Bye.
Bye.
And just like that, another class of MA Fashion Communication has graduated. My name is Didier. Thanks for watching.